And welcome back to CARM HARM version 1.2. Last we left off, I was annoyed and went insane. Back to the first page that I'm still not done with. Let's start with the two main types of arguments from atheists, because there's only two, I guess. Atheist positions seem to fall into two main categories. The first is the lack of evidence category, where the atheist asserts that the supporting evidence isn't good enough for him to affirm God's existence. The second category, where the atheist believes that the idea of God's existence is illogical and contrary to the evidence at hand. To simplify, one position says there isn't enough evidence to conclude that God exists, and the other position says that the evidence is contrary to God's existence. For those atheists who simply lack belief and exercise no energy in the discussion, neither category applies because they are not involved in the debate. But some of those who claim to lack belief in God are often involved in discussions where they are arguing against God's existence. A typical argument posed by an atheist to show why God does not exist is as follows. God is supposed to be all good and all powerful. Evil and suffering exist in the world. If God is all good, he would not want evil and suffering to exist. If he is all powerful, then he is able to remove all evil and suffering. Since evil and suffering exist, God is either not all good, which means he is not perfect and not God, or he is not all powerful and limited in abilities and scope. Since either case shows God is not all good and powerful, then he does not exist. Of course, the problem is that the criticism is a false dichotomy. In other words, there are more than two possibilities, namely, God might have a reason for allowing evil and suffering. Man's freedom might require the allowance of evil and suffering, etc. Okay, so we've got a strawman here. I think that's pretty clear in that he doesn't represent the argument from evil at all. Not, when you lack citations, that's going to continue to reoccur as a continuing fallacy of strawman. Every time you don't cite something somewhere that some atheist wrote, I'm just going to consider it a strawman. I have no choice but to do so. You know, I would have even accepted a blog from some atheist I've never heard of, something where somebody presents the argument from evil. But of course, if you want to have intellectual integrity, what you would do is find an atheist philosopher and find where they wrote the argument of evil and quote that verbatim, tell what page it's on, what book it's in, and try to also find another argument from evil online as well to link that as a resource for the argument. And if the two are slightly different, you could have them side by side. You could say, okay, they're basically the same. You could point out maybe the differences. You could reject and object to each premise if it's logically fallacious, or if you can't find any logical fallacies, you can object to the conclusion itself and argue against that. None of that's done here. It's not even put in a syllogistic format. Laziness prevails. And as far as there being only two main types of arguments, I think that that's an excluded middle. And really, these two that he suggests could be clumped into one, really. He says that there's lack of evidence, and then there's the idea that God is illogical and also contrary to the evidence, which was the same as the first one. So why put that part in there? Just say that the concept of God is illogical. Then you have two distinct categories. They don't represent all the categories, and certainly there are more arguments than that out there. But nonetheless, okay, if we want to try to reduce it down to two categories for whatever reason, let's say there's lack of evidence, and then there's arguments against the nature of God as posited by theists. And since he's only talking about his God and only defending his God, he only is going to care about arguments that are against the attributes that he thinks that his God has. And that's okay, I guess I can understand that fine. But don't misrepresent the argument. But of course he does, so. The illogical nature of God, I think, would have been better summarized by the omnipotence paradox. And there, Matt Slick could have said something to the effect that omnipotence needs to have another definition added to it to include that we mean what is logically possible rather than just being anything that you can do anything, because that entails contradictions already. And maybe we need a different word. So maybe we could call it logically omnipotent or something of that nature. I don't know. But that would have, I think, been a far easier to understand. Say, can God make a rock so heavy that he can't lift? Use that classic example to say that this is a logical contradiction that an atheist might point out that could show that God can't be all-powerful, which means we have to modify this and say, well, no, God isn't omnipotent. God is logically omnipotent, or omnipotent within its nature, or something like that. But that would require work and effort and energy and intellectual integrity, so we're not going to find any of that in this article. Presuppositions are important to us all. We look at the world through them. The atheist has a set of presuppositions too. As I said, there is no definite atheist organization that defines the absolutes of atheism. But there are basic principles that atheists as a whole tend to adopt. I've tried to list some of them below. Please note, however, that not all atheists accept all of these tenets. The only absolute common one to which they all hold is they do not believe in a God or gods. Number 1, there is no God or devil. Number 2, there is no supernatural realm. Number 3, miracles cannot occur. Number 4, there is no such thing as sin or as a violation of God's will. Number 5, generally the universe is materialistic and measurable. Number 6, man is material. Number 7, generally evolution is considered a scientific fact. Number 8, ethics and morals are relative. For the Christian, atheism clashes with many aspects of our faith. Some atheists openly attack Christianity, citing apparent contradictions in the Bible, perceived philosophical difficulties related to God, and what they consider as logical evidence against God's existence. But the atheist criticisms are not without very good answers, as you will see in the coming papers. And yes, I mispronounce words all the time, and I have spelling errors from time to time. But please note, forgot your L there, Matt Slick. Pretty sure you meant please note, but let's continue with this list, and I'll talk about why it's wrong. First and foremost, I want to give credit where credit's due. Matt Slick is correct when he says there's no definite atheist organization that defines the absolutes of atheism. You got it. You should have ended that there. There isn't any basic principles that we tend to adopt. In order for you to establish that, you would need to do a poll. What? There wasn't an outright lie. Hold on. Hello? Hey, how's it going? What? There's no outright lie here. Yeah, I know. I just wanted to remind you that you wasn't saying that last time you've talked about polls, and then you got all mad at... Anyways, we're not going to answer that phone for a while. That was just irritating and annoying. Anyways, what was I saying? So, you would need some sort of data that showed that this was tenets or ideas that a lot of atheists agreed to. All atheism can really mean is without God. That's it. You can adopt all these other things too, but it's not necessary. there's no God or devil. Well, it depends. I mean, depends which God, depends which devil you're talking about. Maybe God is also a devil. Maybe it's an evil God. That actually makes a lot more sense if you read the Bible as if God is evil. And if you read it as if the character that is becomes the devil, which is never really explicitly in the Bible, but people added it later, as the good God that was trying to fix things and got cast out, everything looks a lot different when you read it that way. But to say that there is no is already placing many atheists into the strong atheist category, which you said that there's two atheist categories. So there may not be a devil. In fact, you don't need to list the whole God part because that's already a given. As far as there being no supernatural realm, again, not everyone would state this. I don't know if there is or isn't a supernatural realm or even what that would be. What I do know is that there is no evidence that there is such a thing. There is no test that can be run. There is no logically coherent argument that I'm aware of. There's nothing that would compel me to further look into this idea. Miracles cannot occur. That's another sort of statement that you may or may not make. I would say I know of no miracles that have ever been documented in such a way that I could think that they are miracles. And in fact, the problem of identifying miracles is a philosophical impossibility to overcome. And I will talk more about that when I cover miracles in another video. But suffice it to say, if you can't identify something as a miracle because it could be natural, and the minute you start to study it, it goes away, then how can you know that it's a miracle? So maybe there are miracles, but how would we know when it was a miracle? I don't know. There's no such thing as sin. Just leave it there. Or we don't believe in sin. Of course, why would you think that there was sin if there's not a God to sin against? But you might think of sin in a different way. You might call or think of sin not as it's related to God, but in a different sort of format. Maybe like you're sinning against your friend. That you're doing something really bad, and you lack a word for really bad, so you use the word sin instead. The idea that the universe is materialistic and measurable, yeah, okay, but is that all there is to it? As far as we know, that appears to be the case. I'm open again to the possibility of it being more, but we'd have to have some way to find that there's more to it. Man is material. I would think a better statement there is humans are animals. I would be hard-pressed to find any atheist that would disagree with that statement. But again, this isn't something that you would have to accept as an atheist. You wouldn't have to accept that we're animals. You could deny that if you wanted to. Evolution is considered a scientific fact. Because it is. Now, this is weird. This shouldn't even be on this list. I don't know why Slick continues this anti-evolutionist sort of mantle that he carries. When I asked him directly about biological evolution, he dodged the question. He said that he just didn't have the expertise or something like that. It's been so long since I talked to him, I don't recall, so I'd have to go and listen to myself talking to him again, and it was bad enough hearing him the first time. But nonetheless, he didn't just say, yeah, it's a scientific fact. He dodged around and jumped around the thing, and so I couldn't tell whether or not he agreed or disagreed with it. He seemed to try to do the William Lane Craig approach, where it's like, well, any idea I would have or doubts I would have would be scientific in nature or something like that, which is just another dodge. I mean, that's just all it is. It's either you accept it or you don't. The data is overwhelming for it. Why would you even think that it's something to deny or something that separates us from them, the us versus them mentality? I don't know why this is on this list. I can only surmise that Slick has some sort of disagreement, some sort of beef with biological evolution. And that's a whole separate issue in and of itself. It shouldn't be on this list. Whatever. Ethics and morals are relative. Yeah. That one I'm going to have to actually grant to some extent. I have yet to hear an argument either way that's coherent. So, my audience, if you want to submit an argument yourself that you've created, you can send it to my email. You can get to my email by clicking my About page, blah, blah, blah. It's on there somewhere. It's deconvertedman1@gmail.com. I don't care, whatever. If you have your own argument, or if you know of an argument, you could just put it in the comments where the argument is, and I'll analyze it, and I'll tell you how many fallacies it had. If it has none, then fine. I have no idea if ethics and or morals are subjective or objective. I haven't seen an argument either way that's logically coherent. I've seen arguments, but they've had one or more flaws in them. So I'm skeptical of both positions, which I'm not sure where that leaves me. I just go, I don't know. But I'm glad that he mentions ethics, because that was something that was very lacking last time in any of these articles, was to mention ethics, because without ethics you can't have morals. But ethics could not be in and of themselves subjective. I mean, I guess you could say that initially they're subjective because you have to decide what the ethics are. But once you've done that, then they become objective standards to which you use to measure your morals against. Okay? So I suppose they would be subjective to start with, but then they wouldn't be anymore. So maybe it's a combination that, yes, it's subjective, but then it becomes objective or something. But again, none of these things are things that we have to agree to, except for the idea that we would not believe in a God. That's it. That's the only one that really needs to be there. I don't know why it's important to him to list out other possible things that we also don't believe in. I guess because these are things that are going to conflict or clash with the Christian ideas. Fine, but go after the one that is the certain one. Go after the God one. Leave out the rest, because the rest you can, if you somehow can establish God, then if God is also supernatural, you've also somehow established the supernatural. As far as the devil, you've got your work cut out for you for that. As far as sin, you've got your work cut out for that as well. And as far as miracles, you've got your work cut out for that as well. And as far as duality, which is what number 6 is about, man is material, you've got your work cut out. So you have a lot of work ahead of you to establish these things. But that could all be along the path that you establish God. I mean, if God's a spirit or a soul or whatever, and you somehow establish that, then you can make an additional argument to show that humans have a spirit or a soul or both. But again, that would be asking an awful lot from Mr. Slick, wouldn't it? So I don't know what to do here. I guess I'm going to just have to say 8 Strawman here. The presupposition idea, the only presupposition that I am aware of that I hold is that reality is real. That's it. Everything else is probably fair game. But is that another straw man? Yeah, I'm going to call it another straw man. So that's 9. So add plus 9 to the count. It's already there. Alright, that's it. That's the end of this one. Another 20 minutes of your time killed. Unless until I have a Zelda collection GameCube CD on my bureau drawers next to my mouse, we have to continue to be skeptical that I also have a roll of toilet paper on the same area, but next to the mouse on the other side. None of that made any sense. Just like Matt Slick. That was an ad hominem, by the way. Just even if he doesn't make sense, that doesn't mean he doesn't have a good argument. He doesn't have a good argument, but anyways, I need to end this video. Good night. Goodbye. Good day. Why don't we say bad day? Like, bad day, yeah! Oh.